All right, so let's get started. We know that the new reality that we have here is imposing on us a lot of changes. We know that COVID came and it has changes that have made our reality a new one. We're not going back to what we saw as normal before. And I'm here as the Director of People and Analytics because I want to inform you about the frameworks that the Big Four consulting companies are building and how do we plan to change the world of analytics as we see this new reality come in. So it is important to have a framework, of course, but we always have to adapt. And we've seen more than and in any other time today, we have to be very flexible and nimble. So what I prepared for you is a little bit of how we frame the new reality at KPMG so that you can see one of the frameworks. And again, this is just one of the Big Four consulting companies. Then you can say, okay, how do I react to that in an organization, either from an HR role or I am going through, I saw some of your students, what do I tailor the programs that are going to study in order to prepare for this new reality? And then if I'm already in an HR role, what does this mean for my skill set? How do I need to adapt myself to be not just essential, but really important in the business decisions that are being made right now? And of course, well, how do we get started? Because there's a lot in play and we're building checklists and toolkits and we have over 500 items of people looking at things that we should be doing. And of course, we cannot do everything at the same time. So just a little bit of prioritization and coming back to basics at the end. And of course, well, how would people analytics look like? You have in the appendix also of this document, a lot of the different questions, the crunchy questions that you should ask in order to allow analytics to answer good business decisions. So when you are looking at what's happening today, we went from the first case in Ontario to something that hit us in the media and it's all over the place right now. And what this means for organizations is that we have to create the jobs that were before 9 to 5 on top of the new reality, which is we live at home, we have our families, we have all different kinds of situations that are happening at the same time. Plus, some of us are not looking at the future with a very, I guess, certain eyes. We have anxiousness and there's no clarity of how many layoffs are going to come up, how much the economy is going to be turning down. So there's all this uncertainty happening. So what does this mean for HR? How do we look at it from the perspective of an organization? And the Big Fours have decided to make these frameworks to try to stage what's happening. So this is a 4-stage framework that will say, well, right now you're reacting to the reality that's hitting you. You're just looking at it and saying, okay, I'm in panic mode. I need to get my personal protective equipment, my PPE for my employees, and how are they going to come back to work? And I have a lockdown, and what happens with my offices? And I have all these leave of absence that are coming up to me, and I have to process all these layoffs. So this reaction mode is eventually going to start settling down into a resilience mode. And that should help us, I guess, start standardizing a little bit of those ad hoc responses that we had. And people analytics are going to be a key part of almost like the gateway of each one of these stages. Because when you want to jump into resilience, you will need to know what's coming already. So you already need to predict the different things that are going to hit you: leaves, layoffs, restructuring, cost of employees, etc. When you're trying to get into recovery, then you're trying to understand now a bigger reality. What is the mental health status of my employees? How do I travel from the crisis that I was before into a new reality? And I understand that now my people are going to be in shifts, that they're going to be standardizing the way they sanitize everything every hour, that they will be having meetings just by 4 people in separation of 6 feet. All of these different rules need to become the new business as usual. And eventually you will get it as this is the new normal, and you will have to face now changes that are irrevocable, unprecedented times, but eventually this will take us to a new era. So as we move through these different elements of change, we will see that the companies assess themselves in different ways. I have here a poll that we recently did in the UK, 86 of the firms say they're in between resilience and recovery. And when we really go in and assess, they're really still in reaction, but they're trying their best to move ahead. And how this is possible is through people analytics and the way we use people analytics. Why? Because when you're looking at the data, your organization is able to have more insights, real facts about what's happening in your organization, not just reacting to the news. You will be able to know the skill set that you will need for the future, because it's not just about reacting to the ad hoc HR processes that you had. You need to put analytics in place in order to build scenarios for wave 2 and wave 3 and what's going to happen if I need certain priority groups or critical roles to be in place. What happens if I need to debunk all my offices, for example, and move out of downtown Toronto? So all of these are critical questions that are going to come back to HR or should already be at the table of HR, and you need the data to be able to do that. So if you haven't worked at this time in normalizing your data, having the infrastructure, the technology to be able to take care of your data quality, trust that data, and move it into the analytics world, you're already behind. So it really has to be something that you can react quickly, properly adapt your data, and start making the decisions that you need to put those fundamental arguments in front of the business so that they can make the decisions that will eventually turn into budgetary constraints or resourcing constraints, capacity constraints, or in the best of scenarios, then you're looking at, I'm going to need more people to do these different things. We've seen also all the examples of people that can reinvent themselves in these crises. And I think those are great companies that can tell you, well, I'm really a leader in HR. And I'm a leader in finance and in technology and procurement and everything else because, for example, Canada Goose turned around their production, and instead of doing all their typical great outwear, now they're doing medical supplies and medical equipment. So everything turns around so quickly that if you have the possibility to look at your data, understand it, and make decisions, then you can turn around and say, I know my cost efficiency. I know I can bring back my employees and start working again on a different product, just like that. And it seems easy, but it really takes a lot of resilience in a company that can be very nimble on their feet to just pivot and make a decision to change their infrastructure, their management tools, maybe work in collaboration with other companies to build that new supply chain that they need to bring in the materials in order to do a completely different product. So if you have examples of other organizations that you know would be great to follow, I would recommend putting them in the chat, because we really want to see who's out there and what are they doing, and take those best practice examples and use them to the benefit of everyone else that can understand from their reality how to adapt those best practices. So if you're sitting in HR, you're thinking, well, all of this, what does this mean for my career if I want to be in HR in the future? What does this mean if I'm already in HR and I want to grow into maybe a business partner role or maybe a CHRO role at the end of my career? Well, you'd be looking at, of course, you need to understand better the data. And I have a lot of colleagues and clients that are in HR that are afraid of the data, that they really go into the tables, and if it's an Excel of more than 100 lines, they start getting all mixed up. So don't try to just do pivot tables. Try to really understand, what is the data telling me, and what do I really need to ask the data to make a decision for my business? I think it's more important to be strategic than to be a data scientist at this point if you're sitting in HR. So don't try to get into, I'm going to learn Python and I'm going to learn all these new technologies if you're not into the numbers. Try to be strategic, and that will give you the analysis that you need to prioritize, because the capacity is one of the quickest things where we're going to lose focus right now. And collaborate. Ask as much as possible other members of your business, people sitting in other places. What do they see from IT? What do they think about in procurement? Will supply chain be the same? Because independently, HR knows nothing. we're part of an organization that will definitely need to take from the different sides of the business those insights. And if we're multidisciplinary and multifunctional, then we will be able to have the partnering and have HR at the table, as we used to say. So of course, all of this requires technology, but I would definitely focus on the right questions before going for amazing technology. And right now, work with what you have would be my suggestion. Don't try to get into technology implementations at this point. Work with what you have and make decisions up this pyramid. So as you can see, you start with, well, before it was attrition, now it's what's the impact of my layoffs. And I was recruiting, now I have a hiring freeze. And I had top talent, how do I don't lose them, or how do I keep them rewarded even though I have less cash? So all of these questions, and you will have this deck to go back to it, will help you then start thinking more strategically to get to the top of the pyramid and say, well, what's the greatest advantage that we have right now, and how do we use it as a business in order to survive or change in this economic downturn? And that will help you be part of the business alignment into probably more revenue or changing sales or finding new customers, because every organization will need to find new ways. So if you have a specific challenge, write it there in the chat, and then we can go back to it. Or if you have a crunchy question that you don't know yet how to resolve, that's another way. You have a very good question, but it takes a lot of variables to answer. That's a good one to talk about too. So of course, you all know being part of people analytics means you want to put a framework to be descriptive, know what's happening today, then what will happen in the future. You start getting into forecasting. Eventually, you start predicting to try to get to a point where you can understand the reality that's going to come, not the one that's hitting you right now, but the one that's in the future, and then be able to adapt to that disrupted reality. If that's the case, and you're already trying to get there, the best way is to keep your framework moving throughout the different stages of people analytics. That means if you have a strategic framework, that will allow you to frame all your thinking and be very structured on how you discover your data. Because data is also another way where you can get into a deep black hole and start swimming on data and swimming in fantastic diagrams, and you get nothing out of them if you don't really know what you want to get. So 5 things to keep it simple. Am I in compliance with everything that's changing? There's a lot of new rules, so we should have that as a priority. My cost, because all my business is very cost aware right now, and cash flow is king. Capacity, because maybe there's half of the people that we used to have, and now we have to realign. And looking at your capability, who are the people that are with us? What are the skill sets that we have? And this is the best time to reinvent your career. If you're in HR, start looking at cyber. And it doesn't mean, oh, I was a doctor and I'm going to be an engineer. No, it's not that far off. If you're in HR and you're going to learn cyber, it only means you're going to be more aware of the privacy concerns of data, understanding if you can put in apps to know where people are moving, if the beacons in the ceiling will be able to give you the temperature of people, because all of those are privacy concerns, are elements of data. So you really want to be part of that capability analysis of what do I need to learn to move into the future, and then connect yourself to that different way of looking at things. So this is an approach, as I told you. You will see many slides that talk about this approach in the deck. I don't want to go into all of it, but you will see that in each one of them, there's steps of things that you should be looking at. So keep that framework in mind. Look at what's happening in compliance and cost. Those are your disruptors. Then go into, well, what does this mean for me? Which is all the things that we've been talking about, changes in the workforce. And then eventually that will take you to the questions of capacity. Criticality, needs to be in sight or not, flexible scheduling, high risk individuals, because we all have different priorities in life. There's people that right now have to be teachers, so they're parenting, they're taking care of elders on top of work, because they're now everything is in the same place. and it's happening under the same roof at the same time. So you need to support employees to be productive in this new environment as well. So reallocate your resources, your capacity, be critical in the way you make decisions. And well, that should take you to, there's things we can do and things we cannot do, because the universe has changed and we only have 24 hours in the day. So what should I continue to do? What should I stop doing? And what do I need to change? And from there, you make decisions around who do you dedicate to do these things. Now, as I was saying, the new skill sets are going to be important. 3 things that I point your attention to: learn more analytics, learn more artificial intelligence, and cyber, because those are key things to make decisions now with the data that we have in front of us. And of course, you probably all heard by this point design thinking, and you're already applying it. Employee value proposition is going to be very key. And of course, evidence culture. So stick to the data. Now, for connectivity, please consider the policies and guidelines that need to change. There's going to be a lot of work on that. We will probably push it to the end because it's documentation, but these should be forefront of your thinking. If I'm going to work from home, what's the policy? What's expected of me? If I'm going to be at the office, what's expected of me? How should I keep my employees safe? All of that is moving forward. So with all of this in mind and the 100 elements, think about where to start. Start simple. Connect with your business and find out their priorities. Number 1, if you're not talking to the business and you're working by yourself in your computer at home, you're losing a lot of the elements that you will need to build the right insights from your data. Drive action. If it's not actionable, don't get into it. Don't lose time on it. Just pick something that you can action almost immediately that adds value to the business. And then if you haven't worked on your data and your technology, take care of that, because that's going to be fundamental. And of course, if you can think about workforce in a different way, and I put here social science, we're going to go back to observing people, for example, as we used to do in school with organizational behavior, for those of you who are still doing that in school. Be the fly on the wall was something that was very useful at that time when you were an observer in the room and people were behaving in a certain way, and you would make decisions around that. Well, now we're going to have to observe people in cafeterias, eating by themselves, with maybe empty pods of work in between them, building walls to protect them instead of open space collaborations. And we're going to need to observe a lot. We're going to have to learn on the go and keep our social science behavioral analysis ahead on top of us. And collaborate as much as you can. So I'm running through these, but as you can see, it's easy to think about the HR disruptors because they're all over us. Try to assess, prioritize, go deep into something, and then find the data for that. The enterprise data, not just the HR data. If you can go back and ask finance for data, put it in. If you can ask sales for data, put it in. Try to make decisions that are holistic. And then identify the process and the technology and all the enablers that should change. Maybe not at this point, but make recommendations and build a roadmap. Maybe you cannot change something immediately, but say, once we are in 2021, we should take care of this. And maybe 2022, we should take care of this. Try to keep a long-term goal instead of just being reactive focused in the day-to-day, because urgencies are going to kill your time and energy. So the last section was just the analytics responses. These again are slides that will help you see just where the different consulting companies are coming from and how do we put our models to collaborate better. They would be helpful, but they are a summary of what we've been discussing right now. A thing to consider is cost was before the most important thing to think about. Now it's revenue. So if we're not creating revenue as employees, we won't be necessarily essential to the business. And that's a very different point of view from how much cost did I have in each employee. It's not the salary, it's how much do I gain from that salary, what's coming back from my employee. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a change maker for how we make decisions. I have a quote here that only says, mind your disruptions as early as you can. If you think about something that's coming, try to wake up at night, get a model in place, start thinking about it. All of that is very useful. And the hours that you invest in that are going to really guide you to make the decisions that you need to close the gaps that are right now very wide open with all the capacity and cost constraints that we have. So there's a lot of material here. I hope you find it very useful. A lot of what's happening next from our standpoint as consultants. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them on. And let's move forward. I think that as many businesses are reinventing themselves, we have to reinvent ourselves as professionals and start looking at how to do things differently. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. Julia, would you like